Right.
All right, joining me now live is Sharon Haskell, a member of the Knesset for the New Hope Party, coming on the program here at RT International. Thank you very much for joining us here on the program. It's good to see you today. If I may, if you were just listening to the program, that there is a view among some right now that Israel is not limiting the civilian casualties to the extent the government says that it is. What's your view on that?
Well, Rory, I wish you would bring a bit of a more balanced picture. I mean, I've seen also RT, and you're only bringing one side of the story. I mean, I wish you would show more of the destructions of home in Israel, that you would see the mourning families that lost their loved one, that were murdered by Hamas in recent days, the children, the Israeli children that were lost during these rockets attack. I mean, maybe interview some of the Israeli families who have lost their children because these attacks by Hamas. I mean, bringing just one side of the story doesn't do justice to the situation at the moment. Obviously, this is a violent round and it is a tragedy. Hamas is committing a double war crime. It's also hiding in civilian areas. It's hiding its rocket launching and its bunkers in schools, in hospitals, and in private homes. And it's also targeting innocent civilians on the Israeli side. I mean, I wish you would just show a little bit more of the balanced picture instead of only showing news and reporting when it's Israel retaliating.
Ms. Haskell, I do have to say, I do find your comments rather disappointing. I'm sitting here during the program here at RT International, and we've been having Paula Sleer, who was our correspondent, all across Israel. She's been speaking to the residents, some poor woman who thought she had lost some of her children. I think we're doing very much both sides of the story here. But listen, I wanted to ask you.
Well, this entire report spoke only about one side, and I've been listening to it for the past 12 minutes. It only spoke of one side.
Okay, well, you only heard the last 12 minutes. But listen, yesterday, in the past 24 hours, we had the former Israeli Prime Minister right here, sitting here in the studio. That was Mr. Ehud Olmert, and you remember him, of course. And so we had a half-an-hour conversation with the former Israeli Prime Minister where we had a lovely chat about what's, basically allowing him to really voice his views. But Ms. Haskell, if I could ask you
Laurie,
just...
If you're showing for an entire week the Palestinian side and then ticking the box with one interviewer on your side, that's not doing justice. Just 2 weeks ago, there was a rocket attack of more than 32 rockets being sent on Israel 2 weeks ago. Did you reported that, or did you start reporting only when Israel started defending itself and retaliating what Hamas is doing for Israel?
Well, I've been on air for the past 2 weeks now, Ms. Haskell, and we've been reporting both sides of it, absolutely. So let me continue, if I may, to ask you a question here. How good is the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, in your view? How good are they at their job?
Well, I think Israel is doing an amazing job in defending its people. We are facing a very violent terror organization, Hamas, who is hiding behind Palestinian civilians who have terror tunnels to launch attacks underneath the city, who are having their bunkers in hospitals and schools. This is a very difficult situation. They are targeting homes. I mean, they've shot more than 3,600 rockets.
Well, as you say, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, Ms. Haskell. This is a very, very dangerous situation. I agree with you 100%. But the reason I ask you how good is the IDF is because if the IDF is as good as you say, and other people we've interviewed from Israel have said, then why not just get an elite team of crack commandos from the IDF, like your Navy SEALs, send them into Gaza to take out the Palestinian militants who are firing the rockets? Instead, Ms. Haskell, instead of leveling apartment blocks where women and children are living.
Well, I'd be very careful getting solutions or advices like that. This situation is extremely complicated. Hamas is actually controlling Gaza. That's the government in Gaza. This is a terrorist organization that has recruited all of its infrastructure, all of its budget in order to fight and murder Israelis, to continue and perpetuate a war against Israel. And so when they actually control the entire facility, they are the government. It's not just one single person or one single unit. This is an entire independent autonomy that is completely recruited in order to create a war against another country. This is not just a small operation. These are 3,600 rockets being launched. This is a military attack. These are different units, intelligence system, Navy SEALs of Hamas that are attacking. These are miles and miles of terror tunnels that they have built underneath. Their entire budget is invested in war and violence against Israel. This is not just a small operation.
Well, I never said it was a small operation, but I would look. You're absolutely right. We've been reporting the thousands of rockets. We've been reporting the thousands of Palestinian rockets that are being fired indiscriminately into civilian areas in Israel. We've been reporting that, but it's also worth noting that despite the fact that, as you say, over 3,000 rockets have been fired indiscriminately by Palestinian militants, these are very crude rockets compared to the Israeli military that has overwhelming strength. And here we have the Israeli military leveling parts of this tiny compound of Gaza. Surely Israel could do it more effectively without knocking out so much infrastructure. What do you think?
I think your question is a little bit ridiculous because you are actually accusing us of being capable or doing a good job in defending our people. 3,600 rockets were aimed towards family, children, women, men in order to murder them. And so, I mean, I understand from your question that you might prefer your Jews dead, your Jews silent, your Jews with hands tied behind their back. But we will not be silent. We will not just die and disappear. We will defend our people in any aim and measure we can. We will defend our children. The fact that we invest money and technology in defending our people, while Hamas is investing all of its money in violence and war and missiles, that's the first difference between the government. The fact that they're hiding and shielding behind children and innocent civilians, this is not something that Israel will never do. I mean, try and think about it. Every missile that is being shot is worth 50 COVID vaccines. More than 3,000, whatever was sent in the last few days against Israel, that's more than 150,000 COVID vaccine for the population.
Does that explain why, Ms. Haskell, that the Israeli Air Force, does that explain why the Israeli Air Force bombed the only COVID laboratory in Gaza?
Look, Rory, the only targets that we actually target are military operative of Hamas, headquarters, senior Hamas
the Associated Press building, the Al Jazeera building with Associated Press as well, that building was leveled.
These are the only targets that the IDF is targeting, the only one. There are even videos that were published about military operation that were canceled because they saw population that is not involved still in these areas, and those operations were canceled. We are trying the best we can to target only Hamas terrorist organization operative areas. Unfortunately, Hamas time after time is committing 2 war crimes. It's hiding and shielding behind civilians, Palestinian civilians, and the second one is that they are targeting Israeli innocent civilians. And you know what? The people who die here in Israel, it's not just Jews. These are also Muslims and Christians and many other minority who live in coexistence side by side here in Israel. Israel is defending all of its population, regardless of its religion.
All right, Sharon Haskell, a member of the Knesset for the New Hope Party. We appreciate you joining us during what is clearly a highly emotionally charged conflict there in the Mideast. We appreciate your time and we appreciate your insight. Thank you, Ms. Haskell.
Thank you very much, Roy.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us here on the program. Israelis have been living with the